Welcome to the Elite Universe, Commander. My name is Drew Wager, a lifelong fan of the Elite franchise. If you're looking for an orientation on this decade-spanning game, you've come to the right place. This is the meta lore, the 4th Elite, Elite Dangerous, Part 3. With the initial furor over Offline Gate now past, and the game available, attention turned to the content of the game. Whilst the graphics and sound came in for universal praise, the expectation that more content would be available in version 1.0 over the Gamma turned out to be unrealistic. Other than bug fixes and minor enhancements, there was little difference. Notable issues with the game were concerned mostly with matchmaking and instancing. Whilst these have improved dramatically over the years, they have always been the major weakness of the game, a product of its peer-to-peer architecture for multiplayer interaction. The first significant addition arrived in the form of version 1.1 and the arrival of community goals in February 2015, offering players the opportunity to work together on some tasks such as attacking hostile minor factions or delivering cargo. Version 1.2 brought multiplayer enhancements in the form of wings during March 2015, allowing players to selectively group together, though only in a maximum of 4. The Fer-de-Lance and Vulture ships were added to the game. Both of these enhancements were considered significant improvements to the gameplay and were accompanied by other minor enhancements and bug fixes. And in May, the Mac version was released alongside the PC version. Version 1.3 arrived on the 5th of June and was called Power Play. This was the first time individuals with portraits had appeared in Elite Dangerous, introducing various characters from the Federation, Empire and Alliance with rudimentary backstories. In some ways it was a controversial addition, adding a layer of politics to the game, encouraging players to fight for and against recognisable factions. Some considered it a valuable addition to the game, but others claimed it was not in the spirit of Elite, and detracted from still perceived to be missing content, such as more sophisticated exploration and missions. The Imperial Courier, very much unlike the original Imperial Courier of the previous games, Diamondback Scout and Diamondback Explorer added at this point. There was a significant wait for the next update. Version 1.4 introduced CQC, Close Quarter Combat, to the game via a lobby mechanism. At the same time, the game was made available on the Xbox One, and new ships included the Imperial Eagle, Federal Gunship, and Federal Assault Ship. This was the last release of Season 1 of Elite Dangerous. CQC was initially well received and player numbers were high, but over time this dropped off considerably, leading to lengthy waits to get connected with sufficient players to host a game. There weren't, and still aren't, any NPC players within CQC. Of the 4 editions, the first 2 were considered the most successful. Though bugs and gameplay issues were prevalent, they were eventually fixed. Power Play was thought to have a lot of potential, but in a theme that was to recur constantly through the development of the game, it was never significantly enhanced from its original proposition. CQC suffered a similar fate. This gave the impression that the development plan for Elite Dangerous was either extremely fluid, not really a plan at all, or more subject to the whim of whosoever was in charge of the creative direction at the time. Frontier was in the process of significant growth during this period, and looking at bringing out other major titles to expand its portfolio. The first of these was Planet Coaster, released in 2016, in development during this period of Elite Dangerous history. Throughout this time, strange artifacts and mysteries were injected into the game for players to find, some of them requiring quite sophisticated decryption and sound analysing capabilities to decipher. Season 2 of Elite Dangerous arrived at the end of the year on the 15th of December with the advent of Horizons. For those players without lifetime expansion passes, this was a paid edition, allowing ships to land on barren planetary surfaces. For those players of the original game, a version 1.5 update came out simultaneously, adding new ships such as the Asp Scout, the Viper Mark IV, Federal Corvette, Imperial Cutter, and the Keelback. The planetary surface approaches were a welcome addition, but necessitated a 64-bit game client, which of course required a 64-bit operating system, forcing some players to rebuild or update their equipment. Horizons also introduced the SRV, Surface Reconnaissance Vehicle. Despite David Braben's promise that planetary surfaces wouldn't just be textured graphics on a varying height map, whilst visually impressive in their representation, particularly from afar, the terrain on offer provided no overhangs or caves, and were essentially just textured graphics on a varying height map. Surface points of interest were randomly generated, and large and small-scale impact craters realistically simulated, but with the planet landings being restricted to airless worlds, there was an inevitable sense of, once you've seen a few, you've seen them all. Notably, the release of Horizons was not made available to Mac players. Frontier cited difficulty in getting the expanded game to work on the Macintosh due to various technical difficulties beyond their power to fix. One of the biggest in-game player events, that of Distant Worlds, an expedition out to the furthest accessible system from Sol, at the time, was conducted by players over several months early in this year. The remote system was later named Beagle Point. The disappearance and rediscovery of Jack Station resulted in the establishment of Colonia in the following months. Version 2.1, released on the 26th of May 2016, brought with it the Engineers, another controversial addition to the gameplay. Prior to the Engineers, ships could be customized with various different modules graded A to E, trading cost, weight and power, but that was it. Engineers allowed players to acquire materials and use those to radically alter the power, speed, jump range of their ships, leading to an inevitable power creep. Some players held that the ability to customize ships in this regard provided a major bonus to gameplay, allowing ships to be altered to personal preference. Others held that an engineered ship provided such a major advantage over both NPC vessels and non-engineered ships that they were effectively overpowered. The debate on balancing within the game continues on to this day. Early criticism of Engineers focused on the random nature of upgrades, though this was later improved so that effects could only be positive rather than potentially negative. Version 2.2, released on the 25th of October 2016, introduced the mysterious, and later found to be extinct, race known as the Guardians. Exploration enhancements such as boosts for neutron stars and white dwarfs also appeared alongside ship-launched fighters. Arguably an exploration-focused update, it was well received by players who had felt there had been little expansion of exploration gameplay since the original release. This version also added the first contact with the Thargoids, which took place on the 5th of January 2017, with a player on the Xbox being the first to be hyperdicted. Other notable additions included generation and megaships. Version 2.3 in April 2017 introduced commander customization in the form of Hollow Me, and provided for the ability to multi-crew, allowing other players to share roles in player spacecraft. This was a highly anticipated release, but it turned out to be one of the least effective, as the implementation wasn't compatible with Wings, was very buggy in its initial implementation, and the overwhelming response was that there simply wasn't enough for an additional player to do aboard ship. Combat was handled by a third-person view, which also wasn't well received. As with Powerplay and CQC, it has hardly been updated since it was launched. One significant player event took place just after the update of version 2.3. This was the Salome affair, which will be covered in a separate video. This event was a culmination of several months of in-game activity centered around part of the galaxy known as the Formidine Rift. Salome was killed in a chase across the galaxy while being defended and attacked by players. The event was held exclusively in open mode and was lore-binding. In other words, the outcome would be written into the lore of the game. It remains the largest single event of its type in the history of the game, and this was the subject of a new Elite Dangerous novel commissioned by Frontier themselves during 2016 to 2017, known as Elite Dangerous Premonition, featuring players of the game as key characters in the story. June 2017 saw the release of Elite Dangerous on the PlayStation 4. Version 2.4 was entitled The Return and was released in September 2017. This was the most hyped and highly anticipated release, as it was going to be the return of Elite's main antagonists, the Thargoids, in a big way. This had been teased in a number of ways, both in-game and out during the preceding year, not least with David Braben quoting "Winter is coming" on a livestream. Conflict with the Thargoids was introduced alongside increasingly capable AX weaponry to counter them. Unfortunately, due to limitations imposed by the design of the game, updates could only be made on one day of the week, leading to fans referring to it as Thargoid Thursday. Thargoids would attack stations, but only the aftermath of the event was ever visible to players. October 2017 saw the first and so far only Frontier Expo held at Olympic Park in London. Videos from the event continued the theme of the Thargoids, but with much emphasis also placed on Planet Coaster and the upcoming Jurassic World Evolution management game. Frontier showed a slide for the next update, called Beyond, coming in 2018. And this was to be a free update for Horizon owners and focused on quality of life improvements, core gameplay and existing features. At the end of 2017, the first 3 years of the game had been concluded. Many regard this period as being the glory years of the game, with both strong narrative elements, mysteries and frequent new updates being provided. The next 2 years would be quite tame by comparison.